So clinical trials will be the topic of our first panel, and more accurate to optimize clinical development strategies if you are, like I think a lot of people here, looking for a partner or an investment. So here to guide us are, on the left, Tara Heitner, you're Head of Global Search and Alliance Management at Ferring. Welcome.
Thank you.
And to my direct left is Laura Nichols, Senior Director for Clinical Operations and Delivery at Aixial Group. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tara, you have experience from both sides. You have experience, obviously, from big pharma now and, let's say, smaller pharma too. How is it to be the one to choose instead of being the one trying to be chosen?
That's a good question, and one I think it's easy to answer. Definitely, it's much easier to be on the big pharma side, looking at all the opportunities presented to you from the smaller companies and those opportunities. But Ferring, I would call Ferring a little big pharma. So when we're actually also looking at opportunities that to partner with bigger companies like the Pfizers and the Mercks as well. So we sit on sort of in the middle there. But it's much more difficult when I have been at the helm of 3 different small biotechs, selling opportunities, phase 1, phase 2, or even earlier stage to a big pharma, and making sure that you can meet their requirements, understand their requirements, understand what they're looking for, and actually be able to meet those requirements with the limited funding that some companies always have.
Tara, I'm going to be on your case, the whole panel, to please ask a little bit closer. But thank you, of course, for the answer, and that's my responsibility. It's also because we filmed this today, so that the camera will have sound.
Okay.
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm an old radio gal. I care about sound. No, but I really understand. I think it's good also to have those experience, right? And Laura, to introduce you, you're an expert in clinical development. What do your clients usually need help with?
Coming from a full-service CRO, it can be any number of things. So it can be a smaller, more discrete task that might be writing an IMPD or supporting pull-together documentation for a regulatory submission, your IND, for example. Or it can be full-service, first-in-human, phase 1, phase 2 study, or all of those. So it really is very varied and quite broad, quite wide-reaching. I'd say initially one of the main things that our clients are coming to us for is to act as a sounding board. So quite often the company or the client has got their development strategy in mind, and they're looking for someone to validate that or provide them evidence to support what they're looking for. So it could be, we're thinking of this, and this market, and we'll help support with country and site level feasibility to provide them the evidence and sort of, in some aspects, the comfort to pick the right places. It might also be helping support their protocol development. So they might have the protocol already written. It might be, more or less there, but they need an expert to partner with to operationalize that protocol. Is it going to work practically at site? Is it something that the regulators are looking for? So it can be any number of things, I guess, is a very broad answer.
Well, that's why you get to choose also. Tara, we spoke a little bit earlier about the background and how that is sometimes missing when companies come and sort of want to tell you about the stage 1, 2, and 3, or actually sometimes they miss. Could you please develop a bit on that?
Certainly. So Ferring, my role at Ferring is to look for late-stage opportunities. That means things that are in phase 3 trials or already on the market. And when we look at these opportunities, we often find gaps in terms of what we can take on, and often these gaps are, could have been addressed in earlier stage of development. So we often don't understand what, for example, why the patient population was chosen, in terms of the standard of care that they have been on. Why, if there's already guidelines, FDA guidelines to running trials, if those guidelines weren't followed, why they were not followed. We have often questions on the dosing, and oftentimes the earlier stage, preclinical and earlier stage trials don't support the final dosing choice, and those things can't easily be explained. So we're often grappling with the decision of, can we actually develop this and take it to market after this trial, or do we have to rerun the phase 2 because it wasn't done properly? So it does behoove the small company to really think about the final label. That's what should be driving the actual business commercial case, and the business commercial case is driven by the label. The label is developed through your target product profile, and that's essential to making sure you're actually developing a drug that's going to be commercially viable in the future.
Do you feel like this relates to you, Laura, with not perhaps being so clear for the receiver what your company is about and what you can show?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Tara said, and we spoke a little bit about this earlier, but it's starting with the end in mind. So even at your first in human stage, what is your end point? Like, what is the regulatory approval that you're needing to exit? Or what is your target product profile, and how do you get there? So to do that, you need a really robust knowledge of the regulatory pathway. You need to have designed your protocol with that in mind. You need to be thinking ahead and thinking about all aspects of your clinical development strategy and building that quality in from the start. And I'm biased, but that really comes from partnering early with your service provider, your CRO, because they have the experience and they can help support and build in those gaps of knowledge that you may have. Typically, as a smaller biotech, you're absolutely the experts in your product, in your asset, but there are knowledge gaps, and I think the best companies appreciate and understand that and are looking to fill those gaps of knowledge so that they have the best chance of being able to get that investment, partner with that pharma company, and really thinking about and we spoke about this yesterday, but those commercial approaches and their strategies to exit.
Talking about planning, and I feel like that is an answer that I get from experts a lot, like look ahead, think about the goal when you start your strategy and plan. But if we go to the other side, like how agile should you be in the work to say, okay, we planned wrong, let's change something up. What do you think, Tara?
I think when you initially choose you have your asset and you want to develop it for a given indication, it's to look at all the possibilities that are out there and build different scenarios, so different commercial cases, and really understand if you choose one pathway in terms of your lead indication or your trial design, that's where it will get you. And there's different things you can work with in terms of changing your label when you design your trial, and you have to. And there is some, a flexibility you can do once you get to, phase 2. But the phase 2B trial will pretty much define your TPP, your label. The patients you include, how they're included, and what the criteria is will define which patients will, if you actually reach your endpoint, will then get your drug, and how you can design your phase 3 trial. So you have to plan things out with that in mind. And if you have every single possible indication, it shows lack of focus. So you really need to choose at some point where you want to go, and not just say, well, my drug can treat all of these indications. That's not usually the best way to move forward.
How do you choose the right path?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to actually add to what Tara said there in terms of you absolutely need a plan, you need to start with the end in mind, but don't be inflexible, I think is also key, because this industry, this environment, it's constantly changing. You will hit hurdles, there may be challenges, They may be challenges that you envisaged and have planned for. Hopefully they are. Also, they may not be. So you need to be able to pivot. So it's be able to change, but don't change wildly, right? Because someone like Tara is going to be looking at what you're presenting in terms of your preclinical, your first in human, your phase 1. And can she join the dots when that comes across her desk? Because if she can't, it's going to be really difficult to make that decision. And there may be someone else who's very eloquently pulled all that together, and they're going to be the ones who get that investment. So it's being able to tell the story as well.
Do you feel like there are any certain areas in this process that are more, better to be adjustable and flexible in, that wouldn't scare you off, basically?
I think early on, one of the weaknesses we've seen often is the dose finding, and often in the preclinical and phase 1, they're using such a narrow range of doses that you get sort of painted into a corner, and you maybe haven't found your optimal dose, but a lot of companies go ahead with some dose that they fell on because they ran some trial or early on. And we can see that it's only like a 5-fold difference in dose. And then we're like, well, have they reached their Cmax? Have they explored higher doses? Could they get away with a lower dose? And they haven't taken the time to explore that. That's just one example. And oftentimes in the future, for example, in one case, a drug was developed for HIV preclinically, but then eventually they decided to pivot and develop the drug for IBD. But the dose finding that they did for HIV didn't really translate to IBD. So if you do that more broader exploration early on, then it opens up the possibility for doing more with your drug at a later stage.
Yeah, thank you. I would like us to talk a little bit about innovation. How does innovation, if we talk about now clinical trials, look today if we compare with 10 years back?
I think clinical studies have got more complex, and they're more complex in terms of their design, maybe in terms of cohorts, dose finding, safety review committees, data monitoring committees, various different go, no-go decisions, DLT monitoring. It's a world of complexity, right? But sometimes, and I think this is especially the case with smaller companies, they try to potentially squeeze everything in to that design, and it can be overcomplicated, which can be detrimental. So I think there is a really fine line between getting what you need into that study to prove what you need to prove, the data points you need to show what you need to show to move forward, without overcomplicating things and adding in just for the sake, because we might need that in the future, because the regulators don't want to see that. It's not something that they're going to want to approve. So again, going back to partnering with your experts early who are able to provide that support and know what's, jumped through the hoops of approval in the past, so you can write and structure your strategy to get what you need, but just get what you need and make sure that what you're getting, you're using. Because another point that we're seeing more and more is data collected, but they're not being used. And you need to have a rationale for what you're collecting and why you're collecting it. And that's especially more important now with, human tissue, GDPR, data protection. You can't just go doing everything and, not using it in the future. So thinking about that, and I know we've said it a couple of times now, but really thinking about the end at the start, which can be difficult. So make sure you have experts to help you with that.
Tara, what do you think is the most common mistake we make when we try to attract big pharma to partner up with?
Well, big pharma will know how difficult it is to run trials and to develop a drug. All the companies that I've worked with have had failures. Of course, we know that's common in our industry. So when we're presenting to a big pharma, it's not, you don't have to present a perfect case. And the worst thing you can do is hide data or hide something maybe detrimental about your program, and the big pharma doesn't find out about it until late in the due diligence process. It's better to be upfront with anything, any weaknesses, any failures, and just explain. I think that the companies will relate, will understand, and will value the transparency and the trust.
Not naming names, but do you have any examples, like a story that shows this?
Well, many examples, but I can't name the company names, but where I was working for a big pharma in a consulting role and doing due diligence, and there was something in a patent that wasn't disclosed up front, and the patents weren't shared until the very last stage of the due diligence process. And when the big pharma company discovered what they discovered, it just destroyed all the trust in the relationship, and they did not go forward with the deal. And that's one of the reasons why I say just be upfront if there's some weakness, because the company, if they like you and they like your asset, they will try to solve it together with you.
I mean, you've talked about getting help, but for you as providing that help, what part in the strategy work could be regulations, could be data, strategy, statistics, not to mention speed? What do you find most demanding?
That is really tricky. I think it varies depending on where you are in the process. So early on, up front, the most demanding part is working through the regulatory hoops, jumping through all the things you need to do to get approval. It also is making sure that you are positioned right in the competitive landscape. It is a very competitive marketplace, so getting the right data to support your country and site level feasibility selections. And then as you move forward through recruitment, the trial's ongoing, it's recruitment projections and those timelines. They're the one thing that every client comes to us, not every, the majority of clients come to us with very unrealistic, or shall I say overly optimistic timelines in terms of how many patients they can recruit. And that's a key driver in your timelines and moving forward to the next stage of development. So you need to be realistic and transparent with your other partners, right? Because it's going to hugely impact your timelines for development. So I'd say it does vary depending on the stage of where you're at in your program.
I mean, we do talk about this. The whole panel is basically about tips and do's and don'ts. But Tara, if you should try to distillate this, what are you looking for when you are evaluating, let's say, a small but very promising company?
So the data is the key driver, and the quality of the data, the ability to answer, all the questions. But we're also, when we're looking for a late stage, we want to be able to get on the market as soon as possible. So we look at what development is remaining, if we can actually, after the readout of the trial, if it's a positive readout, can we actually launch this? Well, what's the feedback from the regulatory agencies, and what's your relationship with the regulatory agencies? So it's always good to have a very good dialogue with the FDA and the EMA, depending on where you're planning to launch, and have a record of that dialogue to show your potential partner. That's one thing. And we also want to know we don't have to put any more money into the program. If possible, we don't want to have to run an additional trial. Oftentimes we will have to help co-fund a second pivotal trial, and we're open to doing so if necessary, but we're much more interested if you have the funding, of course, yourself.
Laura, please, if you would give us a checklist, do's and don'ts, top of your head.
Very quickly, do partner early. Do critically analyze what that partner is giving you. When you're getting the proposals back, have they provided you with evidence that they're experienced in this area? Have they thought proactively about risks and showed you ways to mitigate them? Do align on values. you're going to be working with this partner potentially for a long time. So you need to have someone you can truly partner with, because clinical studies, product development, it cannot be done in isolation. Very quickly, because I can see the time has gone red, don't be inflexible. And I think that goes back to what we said earlier. So be open to overcome challenges. There will be hurdles along the way. That's part of the process. And you've got to be able to move with that.
Thank you so much, Laura Nichols and Tara Heitner, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Thank you.